told a lie and said they were going to post every week and didn't. I didn't forget about it. I remembered. And then I procrastinated, so yeah. And that's like the story I'm sticking to, so anyway, welcome back to my channel. Let's just get straight into the video.
Hey, welcome to my channel where we discuss anything and everything to do with psychology and mental health. In this video, we'll be going through the dreaded KSA, and that's the knowledge, skills and attitudes portfolio that you will have to submit if you don't have a core profession to get onto a postgraduate course in cognitive behavioural therapy or applying for accreditation. So I completed the KSA probably a year and a half to 2 years ago, and reflecting on my experience, probably the hardest part of doing the KSA, or one of the hardest parts, was actually just getting started. It is quite overwhelming. The KSA has 14 criteria and most of them require essays. So I thought I'd help you in writing your KSA and we can go through it together. I'll be making one video per criteria, so 14 videos, and I'm posting them each week. And when I post a criteria, you that week can work on writing an essay for that criteria. And I'll link the BABCP guide for KSA portfolios in the description, and I suggest you use that as a strict guide because that's what I did to write mine. And just use these videos to give you an idea or inspiration about what to write for your essay. Again, this is your knowledge, skills and attitude, so it's just giving you a space to be able to express yourself and show that you have the knowledge, skills and attitudes of someone with a core profession, if that makes sense. So yeah, let's get started with criterion 1. So criteria 1 is life stages and human development, and in this you have to provide a self-statement, which is an essay where you have to demonstrate the knowledge and understanding of life stages and human development. You not only have to understand life stages and human development, you also need to know their interlink, and you also have to demonstrate how they link to mental health and how they link to CBT. And when you're writing the essay, bear in mind that you have to provide evidence for everything you've written. So this can be through a training course. So for example, if you've done an undergraduate in psychology, or any other mental health related course, or any way that you can demonstrate through academic training that you've got that knowledge and understanding, if that makes sense. You can also use a reference, so that's someone from work or a more senior person who can almost testify to you having that knowledge and understanding, if that makes sense. For BABCP, there's an extra criteria where you also, if you do use the reference route, that you also have to provide self-directed study. And what that means is that you have to reference books or articles or anything that you've read that's contributed to your knowledge and understanding, if that makes sense. And this is where the criteria for BABCP and courses differ. What I did is I just did all the evidence that they asked for and just did one portfolio with meeting both criteria, if that makes sense. So for example, BABCP asks for a reference. That's the same as a training course, but it also asks if you do use a reference and not a training course, that you provide self-directed study. So that's the evidence that they put in the guide in the description below. So I'll also let you know what I put as evidence in my KSA. So I put a BSc psychology certificate and my transcript. And why it's good to put also your transcript, because that has all the modules that your course entailed. So if you have, let's say for example, done a module in developmental psychology, advanced developmental psychology, human psychology, clinical psychology, evolutionary psychology, psychobiology, something that can evidence that you know about human development and you know about life stages, if that makes sense. Even like social psychology would add to that as well. So I also put my course handbook as evidence, so specific modules that were relevant, because that also had evidence of each lecture that we had. And if you don't have access to this, what I did is I just emailed my course tutor at the time, who was also my supervisor, and I just said to him that I need evidence for these things, and he tried to find them for me, basically. And I know course content changes yearly, so make sure that you have one that's from your year. So you can't use just a generic one. So let's say 2021 to 2022, you can't use that one because that's not the year that you were on the course, for example. That's not really necessary, but I referenced those things in my essay, so I kind of wanted them as just extra evidence. What I also put in was a health and social care GCSE certificate, just to add, because I referenced it in my essay, so I wanted to add it in. That's not really necessary. So I also put a training transcript from work. So I evidenced how I had training working with different age groups. I've also had training working with different issues within specific age groups. So for example, I worked with older adults and I had specific training around that. So I evidenced that in there. I had training in CAMS, specific for issues around CAMS, and I just evidenced that in there. And how you can find your training transcript from work is if you go onto the system that you use to do your training. For example, we have a system in CNWL called the Learning and Development Zone, or LDZ, and that had my whole transcript on there. You can always also email your training and development department, and they should be able to provide you a transcript. And previous transcripts, you can also contact the HR department and they should have a copy of your transcripts. So what I did was I emailed previous workplaces where I knew I did relevant training, and what I also did was use my current workplace as well. And I think that's why it's also important before you leave a workplace to have a copy of, that's what I do now, is that I always take a copy of my training to make sure I have it in my emails. So it's always good to have a copy of everything that you've done, just in case, because I've had in a few cases where they've said that, oh, we've upgraded our system and we can't find your training information. So then there's no evidence of you having done that training, if that makes sense. So now to actually go through the content of your essay. So in this essay, they're asking you to demonstrate your knowledge and understanding of human development and life stages. So you need to include each developmental stage. So that, what I included in the criteria down below, if you look at it. So it might be useful if you're watching this video to have the criteria in a split screen so you can kind of see what I'm talking about as I'm going through it, because sometimes even that guide can be quite daunting, because I think it's like, I'll check how many pages it is because I have it up. Oh, it's only 40 pages, but at the time it seemed like a lot of information for me. Maybe that's just for me, but I felt like it was a lot of information, and in my head it was a lot longer. So okay, it's only 40 pages. If that's okay for you, that's great. For me it just felt like a lot. KSA in general felt like a lot, so yeah. So anyway, the essay is asking for you to demonstrate your knowledge and understanding of life stages and human development. In the criteria, I know it says infancy, childhood, adulthood and older adulthood, and yeah, that's great to demonstrate the ones that they're asking for, but, and there's going to be a theme here of me, like, you know, overreaching and like, you know, just going beyond what they ask. But I think that's what is almost demonstrates your extra skills even more. So what I did was I spoke about in utero, I spoke about early infancy, I spoke about childhood, I spoke about preteens, teenagers, or adolescents. Do not use teenagers, use adolescents. Early adulthood, middle adulthood, older adulthood. So I really split them up into categories because I spoke about how these are actually distinct stages and have different transitionary periods. So young adults are very different to middle adulthood because the expectations, the responsibilities, the role, the identity is all different. Whereas when you're a young adult, you're still finding yourself, you're finding your career, you're in different social circles, you're trying to find your place in the world, and in most cases we're still trying to navigate our identity and what we like, what we don't like, and yeah, the expectations that it's just a different stage of development, and that's what I spoke about in my essay. Also mention the interaction between life stages and human development and how these can be affected by different factors. So what I spoke about is life stages and human development and how there's different stages of human development in each of these life stages. So I linked them together, and because life stages and human development are not distinct, they naturally come together, and you almost demonstrate how you're aware of the complexity of an individual. So it's not just a life stage people are going through, or it's not human development, they experience together, if that makes sense. So if I was to summarize my essay, I would say that it explained how humans develop throughout their lifespan, through different life stages and go through different milestones, and how these milestones are influenced by different factors, so culture, socialization, the country you're in, ethnicity, even an interaction of these, and gender, age, not meeting milestones, life circumstance, socioeconomic status. So they are influenced by a lot of things. So just adding to that idea of humans are complicated and it's an interaction and a mesh of different things, and also parenting styles. So I spoke about how these things can interact and mesh together to shape our experiences and influence our development. So life stages influencing human development and human development influencing life stages, and showing how there's a complex interplay between all these different things that contribute to an individual's human development and life stage, if that makes sense. And I've also mentioned how there's meanings and expectations depending on your culture, socialization, and all these different factors of how you see a developmental stage or how you see a life stage, and the meaning that and expectation that you place on that life. And adding to this, I also spoke about theory and development and evidenced this through my undergraduate psychology degree and explicitly spoke about them. And so I used clinical psychology, developmental models. Then I also linked it to my experiences, and that's the thing where you need to link it to almost show that you have a deeper level of knowledge than just academic knowledge, if that makes sense. So there's a distinction what you can learn on an academic degree or a training course and what you can experience in real life. So use real life examples of your experience. Then when you've done this, also link it to mental health and how, let's say, life stages and human development can impact your mental health. So for example, I spoke about how life stages influences adolescent coping behaviours, and then I referenced, for example, when I worked on CAMS and how I saw that people used, or adolescents and patients used other people as a frame of reference of how to cope. So I used how, let's say, maladaptive coping behaviours could be copied in CAMS services because adolescents use, let's say, their peers or other teenagers or other adolescents as a frame of reference for coping behaviours, for example, and how important peers are to adolescent recovery. So you can say social learning theory, operant conditioning, you can use Piaget, you can use Eric's human developmental stages, you can link anything that you have experience for, if that makes sense. So for example, I also used Eric's trust and mistrust in his model of human development, and explained how in infancy experiences are important and how they influence later coping behaviours or later trust and mistrust behaviours, for example. And then I used to explain how this may present a barrier to treatment. For example, let's say someone does have issues trusting people in a place of authority or in a caring role, for example, and how that could prevent a barrier in a therapeutic relationship, for example. Then I also linked that to, let's say, for example, attachment theory, but really use examples that, very specific examples that you can think of. So maybe first, before you even write the essay, think of examples where it's demonstrated your knowledge and understanding, and then find, let's say, the theory that you've learnt before, because sometimes you might need to just freshen up your knowledge. So just find the theories that are relevant to that experience, because really it's just about you demonstrating not only your knowledge and understanding, but how you are as a professional and your ability to reflect on those experiences and intermesh your knowledge, understanding with your experiences, if that makes sense, and helps you to be able to, let's say, formulate an individual. But what I mean by formulating an individual is that it's a way of saying what your understanding of a person is, and it needs to be much deeper than what's on surface level, because it's not just that, let's say, someone doesn't talk in therapy, or someone doesn't open up as much, or someone is very guarded. There's something happening underneath that, and that's what you have to demonstrate, that you have the ability to reflect on an individual and see beyond what they're presenting with, if that makes sense. But in that, don't only focus on mental health in a more mental health disorders way. Also reflect on it, how it can also provide protective factors and strengths, because it can. So positive experiences at different life stages can provide strengths and can provide protective factors, for example, socialization or identity, and really look at that. Or positive early experiences could provide a protective factor. So see mental health more broadly, don't just see mental health disorder. And that can really help in demonstrating that you are aware of strengths and protective factors, even if someone has a mental health disorder, if that makes sense. And that will help relate back to CBT practice, and you can demonstrate how that will be beneficial. And that brings me on to another point, which is that always link back to CBT. So always refer back to CBT and how this could be beneficial. So you're explicitly saying, okay, I have the knowledge and the understanding of life stages and human development, but I also have the understanding and reflection and the ability to apply this knowledge and understanding to CBT practice. So when you're structuring your paragraph, do it as, okay, point, this is my knowledge or understanding of this life stage or human development. And then you can say, okay, this is my experience. And then you can say, okay, this links back to my knowledge of theory and models or anything academic. And then link back to, okay, in CBT practice, this is how it will be beneficial that you're understanding this. So for example, if you were doing, let's say, absent or inconsistent parenting in early infancy, you can say, okay, this is, that's my understanding. So when parenting is absent or inconsistent, it can lead a child to have more barriers and mistrust. And then you can say, okay, what are the theories? So attachment style, attachment theory. And then you can also say Eric's human development. So for example, if your understanding is parenting is really important in early infancy, okay, it's really important in early infancy. My experience is, if you worked in CAMS, you can say experiences of working in CAMS and parenting styles, or adults and how they've been affected by their early parenting. So then this links to attachment theory, Eric's stages of human development. Then you would reflect it back on therapy and interventions and talk about how a therapist or a mental health professional would need to be aware of how attachment styles or early parenting styles can affect someone's interactions with other people, especially a carer or a mental health professional or someone of authority, and then reflect on how, let's say, this will present a barrier to treatment, or significant work might need to be done to work on the therapeutic relationship and build a foundation of trust and confidentiality and safety around the person before they could do therapeutic work, if that makes sense. So you're showing your knowledge and understanding, you're showing your interpretation of it or your experience of that knowledge and understanding, so you're evidencing it, and then you're also saying, okay, I know the theory, academic knowledge of that. Overall, you're showing your knowledge and understanding at the beginning, you're reflecting this on your experience, and then you're also applying theory, models and understanding, academic understanding of your experience and your knowledge and understanding. So then you're further backing up your point, and then you're also, on top of that, you're saying, okay, how does this apply to CBT? So in CBT it applies because it allows you to focus on the therapeutic relationship, and one of the central principles of CBT is the therapeutic relationship. So it's almost like you're saying a key word there as well. Yeah, so hopefully this video helps, and please use it to give you ideas of what to say or write about in your essay, and make yours individual, demonstrating your knowledge and understanding of life stages in human development. And please use the guide in the description as your guide for your KSA and any information provided by your course, because that is the criteria that it's marked or not what I've mentioned in the video. These are just extra tips on what I've done for my KSA and how I got mine passed. And yeah, before you know it, you'll have a full KSA. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, please leave them down in the comments, because I will reply quicker within 24 hours. We'll also create a community where if someone's looking for more support with the KSA, we can start a conversation, and then that way you'll get more knowledge and more benefit from this video. If you like the video, give the video a like, and yeah, if you haven't already, subscribe, please. So thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you guys in the next video.